What's up everybody? Happy 2021. I'm here to talk to you a little bit today about crested geckos. Everything about care, husbandry, what you should look out for, when you're going to buy a crested gecko, what you should stay away from, and some of the things that make these geckos so awesome. If you're not familiar with us, Tiki's Geckos, or myself, my name is David. I have been a crested gecko breeder and I've been working with reptiles for over 10 years. We have a lot of experience in this field, so if you have any questions that I didn't answer in this video, make sure you leave them in the comments below and I will make sure to answer them for you. Now, before we start getting into the nitty-gritty of how to take care of a crested gecko, which trust me, it's really not that hard, we're gonna talk about their history. So crested geckos actually come from an island called New Caledonia, and in this island, they actually were thought to be extinct up until 1993 or 94, I don't recall right now, but in 1993 or 94, there was a huge storm and a couple of these crested geckos showed up when locals, some local scientists picked them up and they rediscovered them because we all used to think these guys were extinct. But anyways, fast forward a couple of years, a couple explorers from the United States went to New Caledonia. A lot of people from Europe also went to New Caledonia and exported some crested geckos. They started to see how easy and how docile these animals were, and they just started a growing popularity in the United States and in Europe to keep as a pet. Now, there are a lot of things that make a crested gecko an amazing pet. First, I would have to say is the way they're shaped. I love their triangular head, their eyelashes. Another name for them is actually the eyelash gecko, and you can see why. I mean, they're just such a beautiful structured animal. The triangular head with the little spikes. They're arboreal, so they have, the webbed feet, the very interesting toes that has the lamellae underneath that helps them stick to the walls and stuff. And they have a semi-prehensile tail. This semi-prehensile tail, they can't curl it up all the way like a chameleon or a monkey, but they do. It's like a muscle reaction where if they're like jumping from branch to branch and they feel a branch hit their tail, it kind of like clings onto it. That way they could, hang on, and it just aids them in their whole climbing and jumping from branch to branch. Cat's going crazy over there. I don't know if I've introduced him before, but this is Casper. He is my Sphinx. He is a very good boy, actually. He's one of the best cats I've ever owned. He is very mischievous, but hey, I love him to death, so what can I say? And now, while I'm at it, I might as well present you to my other pet that I have here at home. So this big girl here, her name is Lilo, like Lilo and Stitch, and she is an American bully. She is actually my first dog ever, and I am just super excited that I could finally have a companion friend that I could take care of, and she will grow to be my best friend. Now, of course, I do keep a crested gecko at home just because I absolutely love these animals, and one of my favorite things is introducing people to these geckos when they know nothing about reptiles. So whenever I have people come over to my house, I'll just bring out Joe. This is Joe, and he's a very chill gecko. He's super awesome, and he's made a lot of people fans of crested geckos that didn't know what a crested gecko was before. So that's why I keep him at my house. He's actually gonna go today back to HQ because he's gonna be meeting some ladies because I want him to breed this season. But let's see if he gets a little jump for us. Come on, Joe. Come on. Or not. Anyways, Joe is pretty awesome, and now let's get on to the video. So, crested geckos are one of the easiest pet lizards to keep, and why is that? The main reason I would say is because you don't need to be overly complicated when it comes to the setup. You can just get, a nice enclosure. For an adult crested gecko, I recommend a 12 by 12 by 18 Exoterra or ZooMed enclosure. Now, as far as the lighting and heating, you're not really gonna need anything. I actually recommend people to stay away from putting any sort of heat lamp on their enclosure because these guys can handle the cold a lot better than they can handle the heat. So a crested gecko will be fine in 50-degree weather, but the second it goes above 85 to 90 degrees, it starts to get very dangerous for them and they could die very easy. So that's why I always suggest to not have any heat lamps on the enclosure. We keep all of our crested geckos at room temperature, and these guys will thrive at room temperature as long as, you know, we live in Florida, so it's actually not that cold here. It never really gets that cold here, but our house temperature is about 75 to 78 degrees during the day, and it'll maybe drop to 70 to 72 degrees at night, and that is the ideal temperature for a crested gecko. So now that we know the temperatures, let's hop into the actual enclosure. When we're talking about the enclosure of a crested gecko, these guys, you gotta understand, they're semi-arboreal and they come from a rainforest type area. So you're gonna wanna make sure that the enclosure is preferably higher than it is wider, and that you hold the humidity in the enclosure well. So how are you gonna hold the humidity in the enclosure well? This is what you're gonna do. You're gonna keep the substrate pretty moist. I don't like to say wet because people tend to overdo it sometimes. You want to make sure it's humid. So one of the best substrates to use with crested geckos is sphagnum moss. Sphagnum or sphagnum moss, not sure, you figure it out. So sphagnum moss is going to be the best thing because you're going to make it damp and it's going to hold its humidity. If the gecko feels like, you know, these guys will shed once a month or so. So when they feel like they're about to shed and they need to get a little bit more humid, they'll go, you know, they'll bury themselves in the moss, or they'll just hang around in the bottom, and that's going to help them shed. If it's too dry of an enclosure, you're going to have a lot of shedding problems. A lot of times you'll see the geckos will have you know, stuck shed in their toes, or it will just it'll come off in pieces. Sometimes that's okay, but 90% of the time that you see a gecko that's shedding in pieces, it's because there's some sort of humidity issue. These geckos shed in one go. It usually takes about 20 minutes. I get a lot of people that tell me, I've never seen my gecko shed, and that's how it should be, because these guys shed at night when they are active, and it takes about, you know, 10-15 minutes, and they shed, they eat it completely, so they leave no trace of it behind. So back on the enclosure, we have the substrate down. You're gonna use a sphagnum moss. Now, as far as the decorations that you're gonna put in the enclosure, it's gonna be kind of like your choice. It's gonna be your preference, right? So we always recommend though, a lot of branches that they could climb on top of, a lot of fake plants or real plants. Just make sure you know the real plants that you can use, because some are toxic to your animal. And if you are grabbing branches from outside, just make sure they're not from a toxic plant, and that if they are like dried and they're safe to use, make sure that they're not gonna have any ants or anything that can harm these geckos. But if you're gonna go the safe route, if you're gonna go pick up some plants or cork bark at the store, at like fake plants or cork bark at the pet store, then what you're gonna do is you're gonna set it up to look like a jungle. You want it to have almost so dense where they have to like kind of crawl in between spaces to get through, and you don't want a lot of open space. You want to fill up that whole enclosure. You know, you want to give them a lot of places to cram themselves in. You want to give them a lot of places to hide, because that's what these geckos like to do. And my cat is messing with the light and the phone. Get off, Casper. Now that you have the enclosure set up with the branches and the plants and stuff, you could add a hide or two. A lot of times these geckos like to hide. They are nocturnal, so what that means is that they're mostly active during the day. Are we gonna get a jump? Yes? Come on, Joe. You can do it. Joe, 10 out of 10, buddy. Anyways, you're gonna give them a little hide. They are nocturnal, so they're not gonna be active during the day. A lot of people get turned off by that, but you know, it's not a big deal. You could actually take them out during the day if you want. I don't recommend to handle these animals every single day. I don't recommend to handle any reptile every single day, actually, but that's just me. A lot of people do, and their geckos thrive. So you just gotta kind of gauge it by your animal. Definitely the first day you get your gecko, the first week or the first 2-3 weeks, I will leave it alone for the most part. You know, sometimes, especially when we like ship a gecko to a customer, these geckos are being stressed from moving from one place to another, so you want to give them time to acclimate on their own. And how do we know they're acclimated? Well, basically when the gecko is eating on its own, it's pooping on its own, and that's when you're gonna know it's acclimated. Now, that brings me to my next topic, food and water. When you have a crested gecko, remember how I said earlier that you want to keep the humidity up? Well, one of the ways you're going to do that is by getting a mister, a bottle that you're going to just mist with water the enclosure 1 or 2 times a day, depending on the humidity levels in your area. And you just want to make sure you spray the enclosure very well. You get all the plants, you get the gecko, you get the the walls of the enclosure. That way they could lick the water up. You could also add a little shallow water dish in the enclosure. Just make sure you change out that water every couple of days, because it will become a breeding ground for bacteria if you don't. And as far as food, the best food to feed these guys is gonna be the Repashy or the Pangea crested gecko diets. Now, these diets are basically a powder that you mix with water, and it's just gonna make like some sort of like paste that they're gonna lap up. You feed that every other day, and once a week for the babies and the juveniles especially, you wanna make sure you feed gut-loaded insects that are dusted with calcium and D3. Now, what does that mean? Gut loading just means that the crickets are gonna be fed nutritious foods, because whatever goes into your crickets is therefore gonna go into your gecko. Now, the calcium is calcium powder. That's the ones that we use personally, as the one made by Repashy. It's called Repashy Calcium Plus. And that's the powder that you're gonna dust the crickets with, because when they're growing, they're gonna need that extra calcium to help their bones, be stable. And then if you do that, you'll end up with a gecko just like this, very healthy. As you can see, you don't want a gecko that's overly fat. You don't want a gecko that's too skinny either, obviously. But the main problem in the reptile community is people overfeeding their pets. So once they get to this size, I only feed Joe about once a week. Now, that is more than enough. He is very happy. He has a good body, and he's gonna live a long life like that. If you feed your crested gecko every single day and they develop like a quadruple chin and they're just super fat and you can see rolls on them, that is not gonna be a healthy gecko. It might look cute, but trust me, it is not a healthy gecko. So make sure your gecko looks kind of lean. Crested geckos in particular are very slender animal, and the females are a little bit thicker than the males for the most part when they're adults, but the animal should not look super overly fat. Now that we got the enclosure down and the food and the water down, next I want to talk about how long it takes for them to grow and how to sex these guys. So these guys, if you feed them like I just told you, they will get to full size in about 1.5 to 2 years max. Now, if you only feed the Repashy or the Pangea diets, which it is, it won't kill them, it's okay also, but they're gonna take a lot longer to grow and they might not reach their maximum size potential. So in about 2 years, they'll get to full size, and the males will develop a hemipenal bulge, just like Joe over here, and the females, it will be just flat. Now, if you have, if you wanna go into detail about how to sex a crested gecko, feel free to check out our other video called Sexing Crested Geckos. It's like a video we did a while back. What else, Joe? What do we need to talk about? Now, a couple other questions I get asked all the time are, can you house crested geckos in groups? The answer is not as simple as a yes or no. So here we go. Crested gecko babies and juveniles you can house in groups as long as they're being well fed. Now, anytime you house any animal in a group, you're gonna run the risk of one being a bully to another or being a nippy to another. So you gotta really watch them. You only wanna house geckos together that are about the same size. When it comes to adults, babies and juveniles are fine together, like I said, but adults, if you have 2 males, you're gonna wanna keep them separately. Males will fight. They have testosterone, they are territorial sometimes, and they could just be wanting to fight each other. Females, you can house together of the same size. Now, some females tend to be a little bit more dominant over others. That's okay some of the time. Most of the time, the female's not gonna do any harm at all, but you can house them together as long as you're keeping an eye on them and you're keeping them well fed and there's enough places for the geckos to get away from each other. Now, obviously, when it comes to breeding, if you put a male and a female together, they're gonna breed, regardless of what you think, if they're brother and sister or whatever. They're gonna breed. So if you don't want them to breed, keep your males away from your females. What you could do if you are, if you get a group of baby crested geckos and you're not sure what sex they are, it's fine. Once they reach sexual maturity, it's gonna be pretty evident on the males. You're gonna see the hemipenal bulge. You could keep them together up until that point. Once you start to see the development of the hemipenal bulge right here, then you're gonna wanna separate the males from other males or from the females. If they don't develop a hemipenal bulge, then chances are you have a female and you can house them together. But like I said, watch your animals. If you want perfect animals, I always suggest don't house them with other animals because you never know what could happen. But for the most part, these guys are not aggressive whatsoever. As you can see, I could touch Joe right here on the mouth. I could pet him all around. He is not gonna bite me whatsoever. There are geckos that will bite like any other animal, but 99% of the crested geckos that I've worked with, you know, will never bite me. And I've worked with hundreds of thousands of crested geckos. So I hope that answers all your questions. If I missed something, please leave them in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure you check us out on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. Obviously, subscribe to here on YouTube. We also have Snapchat and any other social media you can think of. We're probably on it. So check us out, search Tiki's Geckos, and we're more than happy to help. We also have a website where we sell crested geckos and other animals. So if you're interested in reptiles, check us out. Thank you guys so much for the support and love that I've gotten throughout all the years. 2021 is gonna be an exciting year for us. We're happy to be back on YouTube finally. I'm gonna try to make videos once a week again, upgrade our videos, and bring you guys the information you guys want. Thank you guys, and I'll see you next week.